The silence in the Gilded Sparrow was a carefully curated masterpiece, a delicate symphony of clinking silver murmured conversations and the distant rhythmic hum of a kitchen in perfect harmony. It was a silence, bought and paid for by the city's elite, an invisible barrier against the chaos of the outside world. On a Tuesday night in late October, that silence wasn't just broken, it was shattered. It was detonated by a single voice, a voice so loud, so abrasive, and so dripping with entitlement that it made the crystal water glasses tremble. While seasoned managers and chefs dove for cover, one waitress, Ava, was about to walk directly into the blast zone. She had no idea this night would irrevocably alter the course of her life. The Gilded Sparrow was less a restaurant and more a sanctuary for old money and the aggressively aspiring new. Its walls were panelled in dark, lustrous mahogany, the booths upholstered in emerald velvet, and the lighting was an art form in itself, golden forgiving and strategically placed to make everyone look like a subject in a Rembrandt painting. To work there was to be a ghost, an efficient, silent presence, trained to anticipate needs before they were spoken, to be visible only when required, and to blend into the opulent background at all other times. Ava Petrov was an exceptional ghost. At 23, she moved with an economy of motion that bordered on balletic. Her dark hair was pulled back into a severe, immaculate bun, and her uniform, a crisp white shirt, and a long black apron, was always spotless. But beneath the placid surface of the perfect waitress, a storm of ambition and anxiety churned. Every dollar she earned, every tip she pocketed, went into one of two funds: the tuition for the night classes she was taking in contract law, and the ever-growing medical bills for her younger brother, Noah. Noah, with his bright eyes and brittle bones, was the anchor of her life, the reason she endured aching feet, condescending patrons, and the soul-crushing exhaustion that came with serving the top 1%. Tonight was a typical Tuesday. The dinner rush was beginning to ebb, leaving a comfortable hum of satiated diners. Ava was clearing a table near the large bay window, overlooking a manicured courtyard, when the heavy oak doors of the restaurant swung open with a force that sent a shiver through the room. The man who entered was a study in jarring contradictions. He was dressed in a suit that was clearly bespoke, a charcoal grey masterpiece of tailoring that probably cost more than Ava's car. A platinum watch, a Patek Philippe, from the looks of it, glinted on his wrist. But his presence was anything but refined. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a mane of silver-streaked dark hair, and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite and then left out in a storm. He strode into the center of the dining room, as if he owned it, his expensive leather shoes making an aggressive slapping sound on the polished marble floor. Every head turned. Conversations faltered. The carefully constructed peace of the Gilded Sparrow evaporated. Mr. Henderson, the restaurant's manager, a man whose spine was made of jelly, scurried forward, his face stretched into a pained, obsequious smile. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to the Gilded Sparrow. Do you have a reservation?" The man waved a dismissive hand, the motion so sharp it was almost violent. "Reservation. I decide where I eat, when I eat. Give me your best table, now." His voice wasn't just loud. It was a physical force, a baritone boom that seemed to vibrate in Ava's teeth. Mr. Henderson paled. "Of course, sir, right this way." He began to lead him towards table 7, a prime corner booth. "Not that one," the man boomed, pointing a thick finger at the center table, currently occupied by a quiet, elderly couple celebrating their anniversary. "That one. I want to be in the middle of things." Mr. Henderson froze, his eyes wide with panic. "Sir, that table is occupied. Perhaps I could offer you—" "Are you deaf?" the man interrupted, his voice rising in volume. "I said I want that table. Tell them to move. I'll pay for their meal. I'll buy them a new car if I have to. Just get them out." The elderly couple, horrified, began gathering their things. Their special evening ruined. The woman's face was flushed with embarrassment. Mr. Henderson looked as if he was about to faint. He glanced around helplessly, his eyes begging for an intervention that would never come. The other waiters and busboys suddenly found fascinating spots on the floor to stare at, or urgent tasks in the farthest corners of the room. Ava watched the scene unfold, a cold knot of anger tightening in her stomach. It was the blatant, unapologetic display of power, the casual cruelty of it that sickened her. This wasn't just a rude customer. This was a predator marking his territory. After the humiliated couple was resettled in a less desirable spot, their compensated meal tasting of ash, the loud man sat down. He didn't so much sit as collapse into the booth, sprawling as if it were his personal throne. He surveyed the room with a look of profound boredom and disdain. Mr. Henderson assigned the table to a senior waiter, a man named Robert, who approached with the tentative air of a bomb disposal expert. The tirade began immediately. The water wasn't cold enough. The bread wasn't fresh enough. It had been baked an hour ago. The menu was uninspired. Robert's suggestions were met with sneers. Each complaint was delivered at a volume that ensured the entire dining room could hear. He was performing, and the whole restaurant was his unwilling audience. Ava tried to ignore it, focusing on her own tables, refilling water glasses, and delivering desserts with a serene smile she did not feel. But his voice was a magnet for attention, impossible to tune out. She saw Robert return to the waiter's station, his hands trembling slightly. "The man's a nightmare," he whispered to Liam, another waiter. He sent back the wine, said it tasted like fermented gutter water. It was a $90 bottle of Sancerre. Liam, a cynical veteran of the service industry, just shrugged. "He's rich. They think the rules don't apply. Just smile, nod, and think of the tip. Guys like that, they over-tip to prove they can." But Ava knew it wasn't about the tip. It was about dignity. She watched Robert's shoulders slump with each trip back to the kitchen, each fresh wave of verbal abuse. Finally, after the man whose name they learned was Sterling Blackwood sent back his appetizer for the third time, claiming the scallops were distressingly rubbery. Robert cracked. He walked straight to Mr. Henderson, his face ashen. "I can't," he said, his voice low and shaky. "I'm sorry, I can't serve him anymore." Mr. Henderson wrung his hands, his gaze darting around the room, landing on every waiter, except the one he needed. One by one, they found reasons to be elsewhere. Liam suddenly had to polish an entire tray of cutlery. Another waiter remembered an urgent need to restock napkins. The busboys vanished into the kitchen. Mr. Henderson's desperate eyes finally landed on Ava. She hadn't moved. She hadn't hidden. She had simply been standing her ground, watching. "Ava," he began, his voice a wheedling plea. "Mr. Blackwood needs his table attended to. Robert is unwell. Could you please take over?" Liam caught her eye from across the room and gave a slight shake of his head, a clear warning, "Oh, don't do it." The easy answer was no. The sane answer was to claim a sudden migraine and join the others hiding in the kitchen. But then she thought of Noah, of the physical therapy sessions his insurance refused to cover. She thought of the thick, expensive law textbook sitting on her nightstand, its pages still crisp. More than that, she thought of the elderly couple, their quiet celebration shattered. She thought of Robert, a good man with 20 years of experience, reduced to a trembling wreck. Something inside her, a stubborn, steely thing she inherited from her grandmother, refused to bend. She would not hide. "Yes, Mr. Henderson," Ava said, her voice clear and steady. "I'll take the table." She straightened her apron, took a deep, centering breath, and began the long walk across the dining room floor, directly towards the storm. Every step was deliberate, each footfall on the marble a silent declaration. She was no longer a ghost. She was a soldier marching into battle. Before facing Sterling Blackwood, Ava made a detour to the kitchen. Pushing through the swinging doors was like entering another world. The serene, golden ambiance of the dining room gave way to the harsh fluorescent glare, the clatter of pans, and the humid, frantic air of a culinary war room. But tonight, the war had been put on hold. A small congregation of staff was huddled near the stainless steel prep tables, their expressions a mixture of fear, morbid curiosity, and relief at not being the one in the line of fire. They were speaking in hushed, urgent tones, like survivors of a recent explosion. "Did you hear what he called the vichyssoise?" one of the line cooks, a young man named Ben, asked incredulously. "He said it had the consistency of wallpaper paste." Chef almost threw a cleaver. Chef Antoine, a formidable man with a personality as fiery as his sauces, was pacing near the industrial stoves. His face, usually ruddy from the heat, was a thunderous shade of purple. He wasn't hiding out of fear, but out of a self-preservation that bordered on homicide prevention. "If I go out there, I will say something that gets me arrested," he muttered in his thick French accent, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. 30 years I cook, for presidents, for movie stars. Never have I seen such a pig." Mr. Henderson followed Ava into the kitchen, looking harried. "Ava, thank you," he said, keeping his voice low, as if Blackwood could hear them through the thick walls. "Just keep him happy. Whatever he wants, give it to him. If he wants his steak blue, give it to him blue. If he wants it burned to a crisp, we'll burn it. Don't argue, don't correct him. Just agree. We can't afford to have a scene." Ava looked at her manager. She saw the sweat beading on his upper lip, the frantic, hunted look in his eyes. He wasn't thinking about his staff's dignity or the integrity of the restaurant. He was thinking about a negative review on a society blog about a powerful man making a phone call that could cost him his job. He was a shepherd, willing to sacrifice a lamb to appease a wolf. "I understand," Ava said, her voice betraying none of her contempt. Liam, having finished his very important cutlery polishing, sidled up to her as Mr. Henderson scurried away. "Are you crazy?" he hissed. "Let the guy storm out. Who cares? He's a monster." "I need the money, Liam," Ava said simply. It was the easiest explanation, the one people understood. "It's not worth it," he insisted. "No tip is worth that. He's trying to get a reaction. He's a bully who gets off on making people miserable. Just let it roll off your back. Pretend you're a robot. Be a ghost. It's the only way to survive guys like him." Ava nodded, but she wasn't really listening. She was watching Chef Antoine, who had stopped pacing, and was now staring at her. He had seen dozens of waiters come and go. He could spot fear, ambition, and burnout from 50 paces. In Ava, he saw something different. He saw a flicker of the same stubborn pride he possessed. "The main course is a dry-aged ribeye," the chef said, his voice still gruff, but a note softer than before. "It is aged for 45 days. It is seasoned with sea salt from the coast of Brittany and pepper from Madagascar. It is cooked over a fire of applewood. It is without question a perfect piece of meat. He will find something wrong with it." "I know," Ava said. "If he sends it back," Chef Antoine continued, pointing a thick finger at her, "you tell him Chef Antoine said he can go to hell." A small, genuine smile touched Ava's lips for the first time that night. "I'll keep that in mind, Chef." She turned to leave the whispers of the kitchen staff following her like a Greek chorus of doom. She felt their eyes on her back, a mixture of pity and admiration. They had all chosen to hide, and while they felt a collective sense of shame, they were also profoundly grateful it was her and not them walking back into the arena. Her heart was pounding a frantic drum against her ribs. Liam's words echoed in her mind. "Pretend you're a robot." It was sound advice. Detach. Depersonalize. It was just a job. The man's words were just noise, meaningless vibrations in the air. He didn't know her. He didn't know about Noah's last doctor's appointment, or the way her brother's smile could light up a room despite the constant pain. He didn't know about her dream of one day standing in a courtroom, not as a defendant, but as an advocate, a voice for those who had none. But as she pushed open the door and the golden light of the dining room washed over her again, she knew she couldn't be a robot. It wasn't in her nature. Her father, a man who had worked in a factory for 40 years, had always told her, "They can buy your time, Ava, but don't ever let them buy your soul." She approached table 12, a small notepad and pen in her hand. Her shadow stretched long across the marble floor before her. Sterling Blackwood was leaning back in his chair, swirling the new glass of wine, a different, more expensive vintage he'd demanded, and staring at her with an unnerving intensity. The bored, disdainful look was gone. In its place was a sharp, calculating focus. It was the look of a hawk spotting a field mouse. He had succeeded in scattering the flock. Now the one that had dared to stay behind had his full, undivided, and menacing attention. "Well, well," he drawled his voice, a low rumble that was somehow more threatening than his earlier shouting. "They sent in a new one." Did the last one run home, crying? Ava met his gaze directly. She didn't flinch. She gave a small professional nod. "Mr. Robert was feeling unwell, sir," she said, her voice calm and even. "My name is Ava. I'll be taking care of you for the remainder of your meal. Are you ready to order your main course?" He smirked, a humorless twisting of his lips. "Ava," he repeated, slowly tasting the name. "Let's see if you're any more competent than the last one. Let's see if you can handle a simple order." The battle had been joined. In the hushed opulence of the Gilded Sparrow, under the gaze of a dozen other tables, pretending not to watch, the waitress stood her ground, ready for whatever the millionaire was about to throw at her. The whispers from the kitchen had faded. She was on her own. The air around table 12 was thick with a tension that was almost palpable. Sterling Blackwood leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, fixing Ava with a predatory stare. He was no longer broadcasting his performance to the entire room. His focus had narrowed, becoming a laser beam of concentrated hostility aimed directly at her. "The ribeye," he said, tapping a blunt finger on the menu. "Medium rare. And let me be very clear, Ava. My definition of medium rare is a warm red center. Not pink, not bloody, and certainly not grey. If your chef, who seems to have trouble with even the simplest of soups, cannot comprehend this, you will bring it back. You will bring it back as many times as it takes. Do you understand? A warm red center." Ava repeated her voice, a placid lake in the face of his hurricane. She wrote it down on her pad, her handwriting neat and precise. "I will convey the exact specifications to the chef. Would you care for any side dishes? The creamed spinach is particularly good this evening." Her composure seemed to irritate him. He had expected fear, or at least a nervous tremor. Her calm professionalism was like a whetstone against his aggression, sharpening it. "Don't upsell me," he snapped. "Just bring me the steak. And another bottle of this wine. The full bottle this time. Don't assume I'm finished." "Of course, sir," Ava replied, collecting the empty bottle. She retreated to the kitchen, every eye in the dining room following her. She felt like an actor on a stage, every movement scrutinized. When she pushed through the doors, the huddled staff fell silent. "Ribeye, medium rare, warm red center," she announced to Chef Antoine, omitting Blackwood's commentary about his competence. The chef grunted, grabbing a thick, beautifully marbled cut of beef from the cooler. Warm red center. A child could do it. But for him, for this roi des cochons, this king of pigs, I will cook it with the fire of 1,000 suns. It will be perfect. He looked at Ava. And he will hate it. Probably, Ava agreed. She waited by the service window while the steak sizzled on the grill, the rich, smoky scent of applewood filling the air. Liam approached her again, his brow furrowed with genuine concern. "You're handling this way better than I would," he admitted. "But be careful. He's baiting you. He wants you to snap. Don't give him the satisfaction." "I'm not planning on it," she said, her gaze fixed on the dining room, on the solitary figure of Blackwood, watching her waiting. When the steak was ready, it was a work of art. It rested on a pristine white plate, seared to a perfect dark crust on the outside, a sprig of rosemary and a roasted garlic clove its only adornment. Chef Antoine inspected it himself, pressing the center lightly with his thumb. "Perfection," he declared. "If God ate steak, this would be it." Ava carried the plate out her steps, measured and confident. She placed it before Blackwood. "Your ribeye, sir?" "Prepared exactly as you requested." He stared at it for a long moment, then picked up his knife and fork. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. He sliced into the exact center of the steak. The meat parted effortlessly, revealing a flawless, warm red interior. It was the very picture of medium rare. Ava felt a sliver of hope. It was perfect. There was nothing he could possibly complain about. Blackwood chewed a piece slowly, his expression unreadable. He took a sip of wine. Then he laid down his fork with a soft click. "It's cold," he said, his voice flat. Ava's training kicked in. "I do apologize, sir. I can assure you it came directly from the grill. Perhaps—" "Are you calling me a liar?" He cut in his voice, rising again, reclaiming the room. "I said it's cold. The center is cold. It's disgusting. Take it back." This was the moment of decision. The lie was so blatant, so outrageous, that to agree with it felt like a betrayal of herself, of Chef Antoine, of reality itself. She could see the perfect sear, the juices pooling on the plate. The steak was not cold. She took a deep breath. "Sir, I saw the steak come off the grill myself. It is quite hot. Perhaps you would like me to have the chef warm the plate for you." It was a gentle pushback, a masterclass in diplomatic defiance. But to Sterling Blackwood, it was a declaration of war. His face contorted in a mask of theatrical fury. "Are you arguing with me? A waitress is arguing with me." He looked around the room as if to say, "Are you all seeing this?" And then he did something that tipped the scales from merely awful to unforgivable. As Ava reached for the plate, he picked up his heavy glass of red wine and accidentally knocked it over. The dark, staining liquid surged across the white tablecloth and splashed directly onto the front of Ava's pristine white shirt. A collective gasp went through the dining room. The wine was cold against her skin, the shock of it making her flinch. A deep crimson stain spread across her chest like a fresh wound. "Now look what you've done!" Blackwood roared, standing up for dramatic effect. "You've been clumsy and incompetent from the moment you arrived at my table. You distracted me, and now my suit is ruined." He pointed to a single minuscule drop of wine on the sleeve of his expensive suit. Ava stood frozen for a heartbeat, the cold of the wine seeping into her skin, the heat of humiliation flushing her face. She looked down at her ruined shirt, then up at the man towering over her, his face a mask of smug indignation. In the periphery, she saw Mr. Henderson scurrying towards them, his face a mess of panic. She saw the other patrons staring their faces, a mixture of pity and morbid fascination. She saw the ghosts in the kitchen peeking through the service window. And in that instant, something broke. It wasn't her spirit. It was the dam that held back her true self, the pre-law student, the fierce protector of her brother, the daughter of a man who valued soul over salary that person took over. She did not raise her voice. She did not cry. Her voice, when it came, was chillingly calm, cutting through his manufactured rage like a shard of ice. "No, sir," she said, looking him directly in the eye. "You knocked over the glass. I saw you do it." Blackwood was momentarily stunned into silence by her directness. Mr. Henderson arrived at the table, babbling apologies. "Mr. Blackwood, I am so sorry. Please allow us to have your suit cleaned. Your entire meal is of course on the house." Ava apologized to the gentleman immediately. Ava ignored her manager. Her gaze remained locked on Blackwood. "You have complained about the water, the bread, the wine, the appetizer, and a steak that was cooked to perfection." She continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. "You have belittled and abused the staff. You publicly humiliated an elderly couple. And you just deliberately poured wine on me and tried to blame me for it." She took a small step closer. "This restaurant, sir, is a place of business. I am an employee performing a service. I am not your servant. I am not your punching bag. The price of your meal affords you food and professional service. It does not afford you the right to abuse other human beings." The dining room was utterly silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning. Mr. Henderson looked like he might actually have a heart attack. "You are a wealthy man," Ava went on, her voice resonating with a power she didn't know she possessed. "That much is obvious. But wealth does not grant you a license for cruelty. It does not make you a better person than the people you clearly look down upon. From where I'm standing, it seems to have done quite the opposite. Your behavior tonight has not been that of a powerful man, but of a small one." She paused, letting the words hang in the dead air. "So no," she finished, her voice as sharp and clean as breaking glass. "I will not be apologizing, and I will not be bringing you another steak. In fact, my service to you and my employment at this restaurant are officially concluded." She calmly untied the strings of her stained apron, folded it neatly, and placed it on the corner of the table next to the perfectly cooked, uneaten steak. Then, without another glance at Sterling Blackwood or her apoplectic manager, she turned and walked away. She walked with her head held high, past the stunned faces of the patrons, towards the front door, leaving a trail of absolute thunderous silence in her wake. Ava didn't make it to the door. She was halfway across the dining room, her entire being thrumming with a mixture of terror and exhilarating freedom, when a voice cut through the silence. It wasn't the booming, arrogant roar of Sterling Blackwood the bully. It was a different voice, though it came from the same man. It was quiet, measured, and held an unmistakable note of authority. "Stop." The single word was not a request. It was a command delivered with such force that it halted Ava in her tracks. She slowly turned around. The scene at table 12 had transformed. Sterling Blackwood was no longer the raging antagonist. The theatrical anger had vanished from his face, replaced by an expression Ava couldn't decipher. It was a complex mixture of astonishment, evaluation, and something that looked unnervingly like respect. He wasn't looking at a waitress anymore. He was looking at an equal. Mr. Henderson was still babbling, trying to smooth things over. "Mr. Blackwood, please, I assure you she is fired. We will handle this. A full—" Blackwood raised a hand, and Henderson's words died in his throat. He didn't even look at the manager. His eyes were fixed on Ava. "Your name is Ava Petrov," he said. It wasn't a question. Ava's heart hammered against her ribs. How did he know her last name? She had only given her first. A cold dread began to seep into her veins, replacing the righteous fire of a moment ago. Had she just stood up to someone far more dangerous than she'd imagined? "What's your brother's name?" he asked, his voice still quiet. The question hit her like a physical blow. The room spun. Noah. How could he possibly know about Noah? Panic, cold and sharp, lanced through her. Was this man not just a rich bully, but someone who had investigated her? Was this some kind of sick, elaborate threat? "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. He gestured to the chair opposite him, at the now disastrous table. "Please, sit down." Ava hesitated, her mind racing. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but the mention of Noah had paralyzed her. She needed to know what was happening. Slowly, cautiously, she walked back to the table and sat on the edge of the velvet-upholstered chair. She felt the eyes of every single person in the room on her. Blackwood also sat. He looked at the chaos on the table, the spilled wine, the perfect rejected steak, and a flicker of what might have been regret crossed his features. Then he looked back at Ava. "My behavior tonight was inexcusable," he said, his voice now a normal conversational volume. "It was a performance, and it was vile. I apologize." The apology was so direct, so devoid of excuses, that it left Ava speechless. Mr. Henderson looked utterly bewildered. "My name is Sterling Blackwood," he continued. "You know that. What you don't know is that for the past 6 months, I have been visiting the finest restaurants in this city, and in 3 others behaving precisely like this." He paused, letting that sink in. "I have been loud, demanding, and cruel. I have tested the patience of saints and broken the spirits of seasoned professionals. I have had managers comp my meals, waiters flatter me through gritted teeth, and entire kitchen staffs hide from me. In all that time, in dozens of establishments, not a single person has done what you just did." Ava stared at him, her mind struggling to process his words. What did I do?" "You stood up," he said simply. "You didn't cower. You didn't placate me. You didn't swallow the abuse for the sake of a tip. You looked a man you believed to be a powerful, arrogant billionaire in the eye, and you told him the truth, consequences be damned. You chose your dignity over your job." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense. "My late wife, Sophia, was a waitress when I met her. She was working 2 shifts at a diner to put herself through school. She was the most honest, resilient, and principled person I have ever known. She had a spine made of tungsten steel and a heart of gold. She saw the world for what it was, but never lost her capacity for kindness. She passed away 10 months ago." The confession hung in the air thick with unexpected grief and vulnerability. The caricature of the loud millionaire was dissolving, revealing a man hollowed out by loss. After she was gone, Blackwood continued, his voice softer, now tinged with pain. "I felt like the world had lost its integrity. My world, anyway. I'm surrounded by people who tell me what I want to hear. Sycophants, yes-men, people who want my money or my influence. I started to wonder if people like her, people with that kind of quiet, unshakable strength, even existed anymore. So I started this grotesque experiment." He gestured around the room. "I became the worst version of a person like me to see if anyone would call me on it, to see if anyone had the guts and the character that she had. It was a flawed, foolish, and frankly cruel way to find what I was looking for. But I was unmoored." He looked directly at Ava, and for the first time, she saw not a monster, but a man drowning in sorrow. "Before coming here tonight, my team did a basic background check on the staff scheduled to work. It's how I knew your name, and that you have a brother you're caring for. It's how I knew you were studying law. I needed to know the stakes. I needed to know what a person would be sacrificing if they stood up to me. And you, Ava Petrov, you were willing to sacrifice your much-needed job which you need for your brother and for your education, rather than sacrifice your self-respect." He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a sleek black business card. He slid it across the table towards her. It read, "Sterling Blackwood, CEO, Blackwood Industries." "The scene you made wasn't a firing offense, Ava. It was a job interview, and you just passed it with flying colors." Ava stared at the card, then back at his face. Her world had just been turned upside down and shaken violently. "I have a multi-billion-dollar corporation with a legal department that has over 50 attorneys," he said. "And I have a foundation, the Sophia Blackwood Foundation, that provides educational grants and covers medical expenses for families in need. I want to offer you a position, a paid internship in my company's corporate law division, starting immediately." We will cover the full tuition for the remainder of your law degree, and the foundation will retroactively cover all of your brother Noah's medical bills and set up a fund for his future care. Ava's mouth was dry. She couldn't form words. She could only stare at the man before her, the tormentor, the benefactor. "This isn't charity," he said, his voice firm as if sensing her hesitation. "This is a recruitment offer. I don't need another sycophant in my company. I need people with integrity. People who aren't afraid to tell me I'm wrong. People who, when faced with a crisis, don't hide in the kitchen. People like you. People like Sophia." He stood up, his tall frame, no longer menacing but simply weary. "My assistant will call you tomorrow to discuss the details if you're interested. Think about it." He laid a few $100 bills on the table. "For the restaurant's trouble and for your shirt." Then Sterling Blackwood turned and walked out of the Gilded Sparrow, leaving behind a stunned restaurant, a flabbergasted manager, and a young waitress whose life had just been shattered and rebuilt in the span of 10 minutes. Ava looked down at the business card in her hand, her world tilted on its axis. The moment the heavy oak doors closed behind Sterling Blackwood, the spell was broken. The dining room erupted in a cacophony of hushed, excited chatter. Diners who had moments before been staring in horrified silence were now leaning across their tables, dissecting the incredible drama they had just witnessed. It was the best dinner theatre in town, and it had been completely unscripted. Mr. Henderson, his face a kaleidoscope of emotions, shock, relief, confusion, and a dawning craven opportunism, rushed over to Ava. "Ava, my dear girl, you were magnificent," he gushed, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "I knew you had it in you. I had faith in you from the very beginning. That's why I chose you for the task. I saw your strength." Ava looked at him, at the man who had been ready to throw her to the wolves, who had demanded she apologize for being assaulted with wine, and felt nothing but a profound, weary pity. He was already rewriting history, casting himself as her wise mentor. From the kitchen, the staff emerged, drawn out by the silence and the subsequent buzz. They looked like soldiers emerging from a bunker after a shelling. Liam, his cynical armor completely gone, stared at Ava with wide, disbelieving eyes. I cannot believe that just happened," he stammered. "He was testing you. The whole thing was a test." Chef Antoine came out, wiping his hands on his apron. He walked straight to Ava, ignoring everyone else. He looked at the business card she was still clutching in her hand, then back at her face. "So," he said, a slow, grudging smile spreading across his face. "The little bird has the heart of a lion." He clapped her gently on the shoulder. "Good for you. Do not let them eat you alive in that world." Ava gave a weak, shaky smile. "Thank you, Chef." She needed to get out of there. The air was too thick, filled with the stares and whispers of strangers and colleagues. It felt suffocating. She mumbled an excuse to Mr. Henderson, ignoring his pleas for her to stay and celebrate, and retreated to the staff changing room. Her hands were trembling as she unbuttoned her wine-stained shirt. The cold, sticky fabric clung to her skin. She looked at her reflection in the small, cracked mirror. The same face stared back at her, the dark hair, the tired eyes, but everything felt different. It was as if she had walked through a fire and come out the other side, not burned, but forged into something new. The rage and adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a deep, seismic shock. She thought about the offer. A paid internship, law school tuition covered, Noah's medical bills, all of them. It was everything she had ever dreamed of, everything she had been fighting for, working herself to the bone for. It was a lottery ticket, a fairy tale ending handed to her on a silver platter. But the platter was tarnished. The offer had been born from a place of cruelty and deception. Sterling Blackwood had systematically humiliated and terrorized people for months. He had used his grief as a weapon, lashing out at innocent service workers. He had put her through an emotional crucible, deliberately pushing her to her breaking point, all for his bizarre integrity test. Could she accept a lifeline from the very man who had tried to drown her? She changed into her street clothes, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. When she left the restaurant through the back alley, the cool night air was a relief. The city lights seemed brighter, the sounds of traffic more distant. She felt detached from the world, floating in a strange new reality. Her bus ride home was a blur. She stared out the window at the passing city, but saw only Sterling Blackwood's face, the sneering mask of the bully, and the haunted, grieving eyes of the widower. She felt a confusing mix of anger at his methods and a surprising pang of empathy for his pain. Grief made people do strange, desperate things. But did it excuse this? When she got back to her small third-floor apartment, she found Noah awake on the couch, a book resting on his lap, a blanket pulled up to his chin. He was small for his 13 years. His body made fragile by the genetic disorder that affected his bones, but his eyes were bright with an intelligence and wisdom that always humbled her. "Hey," he said, his voice soft. "You're late. Rough night." Ava sank onto the armchair opposite him, the exhaustion of the night hitting her all at once. She looked at her brother as the gentle soul who faced every day of pain with a quiet courage that dwarfed her own single act of defiance. He was the reason for everything. "You could say that," she said, her voice cracking slightly. She took a deep breath and told him the whole story. She left nothing out: the booming voice, the spilled wine, her speech, the shocking reveal, the incredible offer. Noah listened patiently, his expression shifting from concern to anger to wide-eyed astonishment. When she finished, the small apartment was silent. Noah looked down at his hands, then back up at her. "So the guy was a total jerk," he said, summarizing with adolescent bluntness. "But he wants to pay for my doctors, and for you to become a real-life lawyer, like on TV. That's the gist of it," Ava said, a wry smile touching her lips. "And you're not sure if you should take it?" he asked, genuinely puzzled. "He was cruel, Noah. What he did was wrong. He manipulated me. He humiliated people. It feels dirty, like I'd be profiting from his bad behavior." Noah thought about this for a long moment. But he wasn't really a jerk, was he? He was just acting. It was a test. A really, really weird test, but still. "And you passed it." He looked at her, his eyes serious. "You're always telling me that it's not what happens to you that matters, but how you react to it. You reacted by being strong. He reacted to that by offering to help us. Doesn't that make it okay?" His simple, clear logic cut through her confusion. He wasn't focused on the twisted methods. He was focused on the outcome. An outcome that could change both of their lives. An outcome that she had, in a way, earned. She hadn't been a passive victim. She had been an active participant who had changed the course of the evening with her own actions. He said he was looking for someone with integrity, Ava mused aloud. Someone who would tell him the truth. "Well," Noah said with a small smile, "that's you." She looked at the business card which she had placed on the coffee table. Sterling Blackwood, CEO, Blackwood Industries. It looked like a key to another universe. A universe where she wasn't constantly exhausted, where the dread of an incoming medical bill didn't sit in the pit of her stomach, where she could finally become the person she was meant to be. The decision was still terrifying. This wasn't just a new job. It was a new life. Stepping into Sterling Blackwood's world meant leaving the familiar trenches of her struggle behind. It meant engaging with a man of immense power and complexity. It was a high-stakes game, and she had just been invited to play. But looking at her brother, at the hope dawning in his eyes, she knew she couldn't turn her back on this. Not without at least exploring it. She owed it to him, and she owed it to herself. She wouldn't be his pawn, and she wouldn't be a replacement for his lost wife. If she did this, it would be on her own terms. She would take his offer, but she would set her own conditions. She would walk into his world, not as a project to be saved, but as the person she had proven herself to be. Tonight, someone with a spine of steel who would not be intimidated, and who would always, always speak the truth. The phone call came the next morning at precisely 9 o'clock. Ava was sitting at her small kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee, the Blackwood Industries business card sitting in front of her, like a tarot card, promising a dramatic future. She had barely slept, her mind replaying the events of the previous night in a relentless loop. The caller was a woman with a voice that was the epitome of crisp, cool efficiency. "Good morning, am I speaking with Ms. Ava Petrov? This is she." Ava replied, her own voice steadier than she felt. "My name is Genevieve Thorne. I am the executive assistant to Mr. Sterling Blackwood. He asked me to reach out to you this morning regarding the offer he extended to you last night. Mr. Blackwood would like to meet with you to discuss the details. He is available this afternoon at his office or at a time and place of your choosing." Here it was. The first test of the new dynamic. His office was his territory, his seat of power. The Gilded Sparrow had been a neutral ground that he had warped to his will. Ava knew she couldn't start this new chapter on his terms. "Thank you, Ms. Thorne," Ava said, her decision crystallizing in that moment. "I can't meet today. I have a shift at the restaurant I need to formally resign from and personal matters to attend to. However, I am available to meet with Mr. Blackwood tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. Not at his office. There is a small coffee shop called The Daily Grind on West 4th Street. I will meet him there." There was a brief, almost imperceptible pause on the other end of the line. Genevieve Thorne was likely not used to waitresses dictating meeting locations to her billionaire boss. The Daily Grind on West 4th. Ms. Thorne repeated, her tone unruffled. "I will inform him. 10 o'clock tomorrow. He will be there." After hanging up, Ava felt a surge of empowerment. It was a small thing choosing the venue, but it was significant. It was her first act of establishing that she was not his subordinate. Not yet. This was a negotiation between two parties. She then called the Gilded Sparrow. Mr. Henderson answered his voice, instantly fawning when he recognized her. She politely and firmly tendered her resignation, effective immediately. He sputtered, trying to convince her to stay, to not abandon them after her great triumph. Ava simply thanked him for the opportunity and ended the call, closing that chapter of her life with a quiet click. The next morning, Ava chose her outfit carefully. She didn't have a suit, so she settled on her best pair of dark slacks, a simple blue blouse, and the low, sensible heels she wore for job interviews. She wanted to look professional, not like a charity case he was plucking from obscurity. The Daily Grind was a world away from the Gilded Sparrow. It was bright, noisy, and smelled of roasted coffee beans and burnt sugar. It was her turf. She arrived 10 minutes early and secured a small table in the corner, giving her a clear view of the entrance. At exactly 10 o'clock, Sterling Blackwood walked in. Dressed in a pair of grey trousers and a dark cashmere sweater, he looked less like a corporate titan and more like a weary academic. Without the armor of his bespoke suit and aggressive demeanor, he seemed smaller, more human. He spotted her immediately and walked over, his expression neutral. "Ms. Petrov," he said, nodding a greeting. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me." "Mr. Blackwood," she replied, gesturing to the chair opposite her. "Thank you for coming." He sat down, and for a moment an awkward silence hung between them. It was broken by a barista shouting an order for a double-shot skinny vanilla latte. This is different from my usual meeting spots. Blackwood set a faint, dry smile on his lips. I thought a neutral ground would be appropriate, Ava said calmly. What happened the other night was not a normal interview process. We need to establish a new foundation if we're going to move forward. He met her gaze, and she saw that same flicker of respect from the restaurant. You are absolutely right. Point taken, so let's talk. I assume you have questions, and perhaps conditions. This was her opening. Ava took a deep breath. I do. The offer you made is life-changing, for me and for my brother, and for that I am grateful. But I need to be very clear about my position. I am not your wife, Mr. Blackwood. I am not her ghost. I cannot be a project you use to assuage your grief. His face tightened almost imperceptibly at the mention of Sophia, but he didn't look away. He just nodded for her to continue. I will accept your offer for the internship and the educational grant, she went on. Because I know I will earn my place. I will work harder than anyone you have ever employed. I will prove my worth based on my own merit, not because I passed some psychological test in a restaurant. The funds for my brother's care, that is harder for me to accept. It feels like charity. It's not, he said, his voice quiet but firm. The Sophia Blackwood Foundation was established to do exactly this, to find people who are fighting who have potential and give them the resources they need to thrive. My wife was fiercely proud of it. Giving this grant to Noah would honor her memory, not replace it. The decision is yours, of course, but the funds are there for him unconditionally. Ava considered this. Framed that way, as a tribute to the woman he had loved, it felt different. It felt like an opportunity for Noah, separate from her own arrangement. Okay, she said slowly, nodding her acceptance of that point. Then my final condition is this. In our professional relationship, you will treat me as you would any other junior member of your legal team. You will be my boss, not my savior. If I make a mistake, you tell me. If I excel, I expect to be recognized for it. I want a professional relationship. Nothing more. Sterling Blackwood listened to her every word. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair, and a genuine, unforced smile finally reached his eyes. Ms. Petrov, he said, your terms are more than acceptable. They are precisely what I would expect from the person I want to hire. He extended his hand across the small table. Welcome to Blackwood Industries. Ava took his hand. His grip was firm, dry, and professional. It was the handshake that sealed her future. 2 weeks later, Ava Petrov walked through the gleaming glass doors of the Blackwood Industries skyscraper. She was wearing a new, perfectly tailored grey suit, a gift she had bought for herself with her first advance. Her hair was still in a neat, practical bun, but this time it felt like a mark of professionalism, not servitude. As she crossed the marble lobby, a vast, sunlit space that hummed with quiet, purposeful energy, she caught her reflection in the polished granite wall. She saw a young woman, poised and confident, her eyes bright with a future she had fought for and won on her own terms. The journey had begun with a vile, cruel performance in a gilded restaurant. It had been forged in a moment of defiance and sealed with a conversation over coffee. It was an unorthodox beginning, born of one man's grief and another woman's unbreakable spirit. Ava knew the path ahead would be challenging. The corporate world was a different kind of jungle. But she was no longer a ghost hiding in the shadows. She had found her voice, and she was ready to be heard. Ava's story is a powerful reminder that our true character isn't defined by our circumstances, but by how we respond to them. In a world that often asks us to be silent to endure, to put a price on our dignity, she chose to speak her truth, even when it meant risking everything. It was a gamble that paid off in the most unexpected way, proving that integrity is a currency that the truly powerful will always recognize. Her journey from a struggling waitress to a promising law professional wasn't an act of charity. It was a transaction of respect earned in a single brave moment. If Ava's story of resilience and courage resonated with you, please take a moment to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who might need a reminder of their own inner strength. And for more real-life stories that inspire and surprise, make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Your support helps us continue to find and share these incredible tales. Thank you for listening.